Welcome to HQ Spotlight, folks. That's Haley Sutton. I'm Tommy Tram. We are with you for the next 2 hours. And if our show is anything like the 5 minutes before coming on air right now,
buckle up.
We should have fun. We're in the dog days of summer here, Haley. So why don't we start with a bit of a flashback, a little time capsule type thing?
A little flashback. You know, there's been some talks about what's happened on this day in sports. I'm actually going to take a little bit different of an angle here because back in 1996, the Spice Girls released their iconic song Wanna Be. Of course, it launched their international career all over. And then, as we know today, 15 years ago, the wannabe superstar himself made his big decision. Of course, we're talking about LeBron James. He's not a wannabe. He is the greatest. But 15 years ago today, it certainly was an exciting time. LeBron James taking his talent to South Beach, linking up with what would become the Big Three in the 305. Dubbed, quote, the decision, the news sent shockwaves across the NBA, reshaping the way players and teams approach the sport as the era of player empowerment officially tipped off. Of course, Chris Bosh, Dwayne Wade, and James would go on to win 2 NBA championships as a trio in South Florida as the landscape of hoops changed forever. You had teams sent scrambling to find their own rendition of the Big Three. Would they be good enough to compete in South Florida? And to this day, we still talk about the Big Three and what that looks like in 2025. So the decision clearly still largely impacting how we view the game, but not all dynasties, not all super teams are created equal. So we're going to peel back history a little bit more and break it down with our NBA analyst and Gonzalez and Tim Doyle. We are certainly in store for a great time. Gentlemen, we got to start, though, down in South Beach where Heat fans still kind of chasing that white-hot winning feeling. John, what do you remember most about the decision, about that day with LeBron James, and what unfolded afterwards?
Yeah, it was momentous, right? I mean, we were all waiting to find out where LeBron James wanted to go. Obviously, Cleveland was pretty bummed out about the result there, but teaming up with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh in South Beach was momentous. It transcended, Haley, really even sports or the NBA, and really got into the zeitgeist and into pop culture. Everybody was focused on it. And I think in retrospect, it's that much more momentous because free agency as we knew it then no longer exists today. With the new CBA, you don't see players like LeBron James' stature or even Chris Bosh's stature moving in free agency anymore. Players like to lock up their long-term deals and then force their way out via trade. I mean, this past free agency that just kicked off last week, who are the biggest players to move? I mean, we're talking about Miles Turner leaving Indiana to go to the Bucks. Nickeil Alexander-Walker had a really good season, not exactly a household name going to Atlanta. So yeah, what happened with LeBron James back in 2010, we're never going to see it again.
Yeah, I remember where I was. I was at a bar. Obviously, it was a Thursday night. And I was single. It was actually dollar beers. I was at McGee's. And I was just kind of looking back 15 years ago. No wife, no 3 kids, no minivan. Haley.
Life looked a lot different for you back then, Tim Doyle. So let's get to the reaction. How'd you feel?
Yeah, I mean, everyone at the bar was surprised. And, you know, Jim Gray is there. I feel like Jim Gray always has his nose in, like, the weirdest sports moment, asking, like, the hardest questions. Like, of course, Jim Gray is doing it. And by the way, Jim Gray, still alive, still doing it. So hats off to him. So, you know, LeBron, I think by going back to Cleveland and winning with the Cavs, changed his legacy for his entire basketball career. But to that point, up until making that decision, you know, he was just a wonderful basketball player that couldn't get over the hump. Goes down to Miami, obviously has an epic run, wins multiple championships. But for me, guys, when he goes to Cleveland and wins a title in dramatic fashion, knocking off the Warriors, one of the great teams of all time, that changed his legacy altogether.
Certainly has been quite the player to watch, and it's interesting, too, that we're still talking about LeBron James to this day. We're going to get to him in just a little bit more in the show. But, Tim, when we talk about the Big Three, I know the Heat kind of, takes over that spot we just talked about. But before that, it was Boston, right? They had KG, they had Ray Allen, they had Paul Pierce. How did that Boston team sort of set the tone for what we're seeing even into 2025?
Yeah, I mean, John knows this. He's covered all sports. Once you see some success, right, then everybody tries to do it. Heck, the Brooklyn Nets tried to do it, John. You remember that? They were like, yeah, let's just go get the Boston, a couple of those guys, and throw them on the roster. And, you know, it didn't work. Yeah, that's right, twice, because they did it with Durant and Harden. So, you know, everyone started copycatting this model. The Celtics were fantastic. Kevin Garnett had a great career in Minnesota, but he couldn't get over the hump. And Paul Pierce was another guy that couldn't get over the hump. They combined those guys. They added Ray Allen, who was a great player at that point. Rajon Rondo was a great fit. And this was really the start, John, of the Big Three era.
John, let's talk about some of the teams that figured out the super team model going forward. And we'll start with the Golden State Warriors because obviously the Splash Brothers, we clearly miss them out west. But just seeing the introduction as well of Draymond Green and his villain era, where do the Warriors rank for you in terms of super teams?
Yeah, number one from recent vintage, Haley. I mean, they were incredible. Even before they got KD, the Steph and Draymond and Klay Thompson grouping where they won 2 championships. That was a group where, Steph Curry, we were talking about LeBron James and his legacy and how it changed when he moved to Miami. With Steph, it was, okay, he's a really good shooter. But remember, you had people like Charles Barkley and Shaquille O'Neal, who I love watching on that program, saying, well, you can't win if you're a shooting team. You can't win with a small guard. And then here comes Steph to defy all of that. And I was one of the people who said, well, I'm not sure that this group is going to work out. Remember back then, there were some rumors about, hey, maybe they're going to move on from Klay Thompson and trade for Kevin Love. I thought that was a good idea. Luckily, I'm not in charge of the Golden State Warriors because they decided not to go that route. And then the salary cap increases, and they end up beating Oklahoma City back when they had Russell Westbrook and James Harden and Kevin Durant. And Kevin Durant, rather than trying to run it back with his group, decided, you know what, if you can't beat him, you join him. He goes to Golden State, and he wins 2 titles with them as well. So that whole grouping, I mean, I don't know that we're going to see a super team like that again because the new salary cap with the second apron is so prohibitive. When you get into the second apron, it makes team building of that sort with players that expensive extremely difficult. We saw what just happened with the Boston Celtics, where they basically had to dismantle their team. So that might be, Haley, the last great super team of its kind.
Yeah, well said. And no doubt, I think the best super team, and I'll take it a step further than you, John. I think the greatest team in the history of the NBA. And I feel pretty comfortable saying that. Yes, I feel like you want to go toe-to-toe. Those guys were in the prime of their career. Like Steph Curry, prime of his career. Klay Thompson, prime of his career. 2 Hall of Famers. Durant, Hall of Famer. I think Draymond Green, when it's all said and done, Hall of Famer. So I believe that this was the best team of all time. So you want to talk about Michael's teams? I think it would have been an unbelievable series because the Bulls could have matched up with Jordan and Pittman. They could guard Tony Kukoc, Dennis Rodman. I just think the Warriors could spread you out. They could shoot the 3 better. The game was played differently back then. My dad played in the NBA in the 60s, and it was all about getting as close to the basket as possible. Now the NBA is how far away can you get from the basket and how many threes could you shoot? So that's what the evolution of the game has been since Jordan played to the Warriors played. But I feel really comfortable saying that. Durant, Steph, Klay, best team of all time.
I mean, they were fun to watch. I know that the KD situation rubbed some people the wrong way in terms of his legacy, but you cannot knock that they were fun to watch shoot from deep. Of course, John, on the other side of the coin, we've seen some failed super team experiments. Look no further than a team mentioned by Tim earlier in Brooklyn, the 2021-22 edition of that crew. There was so much promise on paper. James Harden, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, who we just talked about with the Warriors. Special individually, ultimately, why didn't it work out in Brooklyn, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, they only played 16 games together, Haley. There was the pandemic and Kyrie and the vaccination issues for sure. Some chemistry issues. They couldn't get healthy. But as Tim mentioned, the Brooklyn Nets took 2 bites at this apple. First, they tried it with KG and Paul Pierce. Didn't work. And then all of a sudden, they cleared enough cap space. They rebooted the franchise, and KD and Kyrie became free agents at the same time. And you remember, I believe it was at an All-Star game where they were in the tunnel, and there was the video of KD and Kyrie talking, and Kyrie was saying 2 max slots. And everybody thought it was going to be to the New York Knicks, but it turned out to be their crosstown rivals in air quotes, the Brooklyn Nets, and it just never worked out. And it was so bad that James Harden, who famously has moved around quite often, decided, like, I can't handle this. I've had enough of Kyrie, and he asked out to go to, of all places, Philadelphia, that hasn't done anything since Allen Iverson left in 25 years. How bad do things have to be for you to look at Philadelphia and the 76ers and the process and go, oh yeah, that's a better situation for me? So full marks to the Nets. It was funny while it lasted, but it didn't go very well.
Yeah, it did not. And it didn't last very long either. So at least they were able to get out of the hole and move on and deal with a different hole going forward. We'll wait and see when the Nets can come back and be competitive. Tim, the West Coast, though, not free here when it comes to not so great super teams. There was a Lakers squad that didn't pan out as well when LA had acquired all-stars Steve Nash, Dwight Howard to help out the late Kobe Bryant. So the starting 5 that year didn't look so bad. You had Pau Gasol and Metta World Peace in the mix as well. So a similar question I just asked John, what happened with this team out in LA?
Yeah, I mean, they had some injuries. Dwight was banged up. Pau Gasol was banged up. Steve Nash was not at 100%. You're right. On paper, this team was fantastic. I remember vividly sitting with Sean Marion after we had played in a run in Chicago and him telling me that this team was going to win the NBA championship. And I remember telling him the former Suns great, Mavericks great. I go, you're out of your mind. This team's not going to work. There's only one basketball. Kobe and Nash on the same team. Now, we never saw them at full strength, but to say it was a disaster, they still were over 500. They were swept in the first round, kind of similar to John's pick as well. On paper, made a lot of sense. I mean, Dwight Howard's going to be a Hall of Famer. He's one of the great centers of his generation. Steve Nash won multiple MVPs. Kobe's one of the greatest of all time. But when you're building a team, everyone has to understand their role. That's what made OKC so tough this year. Everyone understood that SGA was the guy, Jalen Williams was the second guy, and then everybody else fell in line and understood what they did. So I think the Nets really made an interesting decision, making 5 first-round draft picks instead of trying to make a move and maybe get a vet and try to figure out a squad. So they're going with all young guys. So it always just seems like the Nets, whatever they're doing, don't do what they're doing, and then you're going to end up being pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, this Lakers team on paper, you would have thought, man, at the very least, I was super excited to watch them. I thought, wow, you've got 2 former MVPs in Nash and Kobe Bryant, but it was late stage Kobe and Nash, right? Like Kobe was about to announce his retirement that lasted an entire year. I saw him launch that in Philadelphia, and it was just an entire season of him feting himself and getting all the plaudits. And rightly so, he had an amazing career. But Tim's right. There's only one basketball. And I think like what we've learned about super teams is you have to have players that are willing to share the ball and also know their role. And this was a team where that was always Kobe Bryant's Lakers from the beginning when he got there. He forces out Shaq, the whole bit where it was like, okay, this is my organization, and Steve Nash came in at the tail end and it just didn't work out, but it should have been much more successful than it ended up being, and at the very least it was entertaining, but I was surprised that they didn't get more out of it than a first round exit.
Yeah, you never know how those super teams are going to work out, if they want to share the ball, if they want to share the money, all the things. Guys, good news, you're going to stick around for just a few more minutes here on Spotlight as we focused on the decision surrounding LeBron James. On this day 15 years ago, he took his talents to South Beach, and the NBA changed forever. You know, OKC kind of has a big 3 of their own as well. As you take a look at the odds to win the NBA Finals next year, they were led by HGA, J-Dub, and Chet Holmgren this year. We'll see if they can run it back in 2025 at plus 250. Not bad, Tommy Tran.